It said, "The old lady who's paying for everything." That was my name tag, my title. My introduction to the world was at my own granddaughter's wedding. The letters were printed in shiny silver on a white card, slipped into a plastic sleeve. When the young woman at the reception table handed it to me, she smiled like she'd done nothing wrong. Around us, laughter spilled from the ballroom, and a string quartet played something light, something that didn't fit the way my stomach dropped. For a moment, I thought it was a mistake. Then I saw the bridesmaids giggling behind their manicured hands, whispering, "She actually put it on." And I realized it wasn't a joke. It was the truth they'd been saying behind closed doors, finally printed out for everyone to see. The violin kept playing. The air smelled of roses, champagne, and expensive perfume I'd paid for. Every chair, every flower arch, every satin napkin in that room had my money woven into it. $42,000 for a night where I wasn't even family, just the sponsor. I pinned the tag to my cardigan anyway. Habit, maybe, or dignity. My hands were steady, though my heart wasn't. I walked into the hall, lights blinding, applause roaring for the couple who barely looked my way. My granddaughter stood in her white gown, lace sleeves, pearls at the waist. I remembered the day we bought that dress. She'd twirled in front of the mirror, eyes shining, calling me Grandma, my fairy godmother. Now she avoided my gaze as if I were a stranger. Her new husband leaned close, whispering something that made her laugh. The same laugh that used to fill my kitchen when she was 6, standing on a chair to stir pancake batter. Only now, it sounded hollow. I took my seat at the far end of the room, table 14, near the service door, where waiters rushed in and out with trays. Cold air brushed my back every time the door swung open. I watched from a distance as speeches began. The wedding planner got a thank you. The band got a thank you. Even the decorator. My name never came up. But when the MC joked, "Let's give a round of applause to our mysterious benefactor, the old lady who made this all possible," the crowd laughed. My granddaughter didn't stop him. She laughed too. I felt the sting travel up my spine, not sharp, just slow and deep, the kind of pain that doesn't scream, it settles. I reached for my glass of water, hand trembling, and whispered to myself, "Don't cry here, not here." My mother's voice echoed in my head, "Keep your chin high even when they step on it." After the cake was cut, a 5-tier monument to sugar and vanity, I walked out to the hallway. The laughter inside dimmed to a distant hum. I looked down at that tag again, the words catching the chandelier's light. The old lady who's paying for everything. That's who they saw. Not Martha Johnson, widow of a veteran retired teacher of 30 years. Not the woman who sold her little blue house to pay for her daughter's debts and her granddaughter's tuition. Not the woman who worked overtime at the library, clipping coupons just to buy a graduation ring. Just the old lady, a wallet with a heartbeat. I slipped the tag into my purse like evidence. Maybe someday, I thought, I'd need to remember this feeling, this clean, cold kind of betrayal. In the restroom mirror, I studied myself. Silver curls, pearl earrings, lipstick slightly smudged. I looked dignified, maybe even powerful, yet invisible to the people who'd eaten from my hands. I took a deep breath and straightened my back. The air tasted metallic. When I stepped outside, night had fallen over the parking lot. The hotel lights glimmered against the hoods of cars, tiny reflections of a celebration I no longer belonged to. I sat behind the wheel, engine off, silence pressing around me. The name tag lay on the passenger seat, its plastic sleeve catching the glow from a street lamp. I ran my thumb over the letters until they blurred. The old lady who's paying for everything. Maybe they were right. Until tonight. Because as the violin inside slid into another love song, I felt something shift. Not rage, not grief, just clarity. Tomorrow morning, the transfers would stop. The accounts would close. The old lady would retire from funding other people's happiness. And that would be the first real gift I'd ever bought for myself. The first laugh hit harder than the music. It came from the table right behind me. Young voices, champagne bubbly and careless. I could hear every word. "Look, she's actually wearing it," one of them whispered. Another giggled. "Well, she did pay for the whole thing, didn't she?" The sound sliced through the love song playing overhead. I sat still, hands folded in my lap, eyes on the center stage where my granddaughter and her husband swayed under soft golden lights. She looked radiant, like something out of a bridal magazine. The train of her gown glittered as she spun. I used to imagine this day since she was a child, back when she wore my pearls and danced around the living room calling me Mama Martha. Now, not even her shadow reached my corner. The waiter came by to refill my water glass. His name tag said David, neat letters on a silver pin. For a strange second, I looked at his tag longer than I should, because his name was there, his name. Mine wasn't. The master of ceremonies, a man in a too-tight tuxedo, tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, before dinner is served, let's take a moment to thank the people who made this night possible." He read from a list: sponsors, planners, floral teams, the band. Then he smiled toward my table. "And of course, a round of applause for our very own patron saint of generosity, our dear old lady who's paying for everything." The crowd erupted in laughter and claps. Someone even whistled. My heart didn't break. It froze. I watched my granddaughter's face. She didn't flinch. She smiled, even raised her glass in my direction like it was a toast. The photographer caught the moment, her laughing, me frozen. I imagined how that picture would look later. Joy on one side, quiet ruin on the other. The sound in the room blurred. The violin turned thin, the air heavy. I could feel the makeup cracking on my cheekbones. My pearls felt tight, like a collar. When the laughter faded, I tried to breathe. I reached for my clutch, found my phone inside, but didn't unlock it. There was no one to call. The only person who would have understood, my husband, had been gone for 9 years. He used to call me his storm. Now all that was left of the storm was still water. I stood up slowly, pretending to stretch my legs. Nobody noticed. The spotlight moved elsewhere, following the newlyweds. The ballroom glittered like a jewelry box. Crystal chandeliers, gold linens, white orchids, every inch paid by me. My knees ached, but my pride hurt worse. Near the entrance, a little girl, probably one of the flower girls, stared at me. She pointed at my chest. "Why does it say that?" she asked, voice small. Her mother hushed her quickly. "Don't bother the guests, sweetie." But I looked down anyway. The tag caught the light again. The old lady who's paying for everything. I smiled at the child. "Because sometimes," I said softly, "people forget your real name." Outside the ballroom, the corridor was silent except for distant laughter seeping through the doors. I walked toward the lobby, the carpet thick under my heels. My reflection followed me in every mirror. A well-dressed woman who looked like she belonged everywhere and nowhere. At the hotel's front window, I stopped. Through the glass, I could see my car parked under a flickering street lamp. The night air pressed cold against the glass, and I could almost feel it on my skin. For a moment, I thought about leaving right then, just walking out. But something in me refused. I wanted them to see me go. So I turned back, walked through the doors, slow, deliberate. The laughter dipped for a second as I passed between tables. Someone whispered, "Is she okay?" Someone else said, "She's dramatic." I didn't answer. I walked straight to the table where the wedding gifts were stacked, boxes wrapped in gold, ribbons tied perfectly. On top sat a crystal vase I'd ordered from Italy, a gift from me to them. I took the envelope I'd prepared from my purse, the check, $5,000 for their honeymoon, and tore it cleanly in half. The sound was crisp, like a match being struck. Then I placed the torn pieces neatly beside the vase and walked away. No one stopped me. No one dared. When I reached the exit, I looked back once. My granddaughter was still dancing, veil fluttering, unaware that the woman who raised her had just erased herself from her fairy tale. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. The doorman opened the glass door for me. "Have a good evening, ma'am," he said. I nodded. You too? Outside, the air smelled of night jasmine and exhaust. I breathed in deep. In my car, I unpinned the tag and laid it on the passenger seat. The words glimmered faintly under the dashboard light. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, I rolled down the window and let it slip from my fingers. It fluttered once, twice, before landing in a puddle. The ink began to bleed, silver turning gray, gray turning into nothing. For the first time that night, I smiled. 5 years. That's how long it took to build that wedding. Not the flowers, not the venue, the illusion. 5 years of checks, transfers. Don't worry, Grandma will take care of it. After my husband died, I thought money could keep love close. He'd always handled the bills, the mortgages, the investments. I was a teacher, good with people, not with numbers. So when he passed, I started measuring love in dollars. Every call, every visit came with a price tag. I didn't see it then. I just felt grateful they still needed me. When my daughter lost her job, I covered her rent. 8 months straight, whiling $200 each. When my granddaughter got into nursing school, I paid the tuition, $1,140 that first year. You're our rock, Mom, my daughter said. I smiled, believing it. Then the calls changed tone. They weren't, "How are you, Mom?" anymore. They were, "Could you transfer it today? We're running late." Every transaction had a story attached. A sick pet, a broken car, a delayed paycheck. I never asked for receipts. Love doesn't come with receipts, right? By year 3, I'd sold my little blue house, the one with the rose bushes he planted for me. The realtor said I could get $310,000 if I moved fast. I did. I told everyone I wanted to downsize. But the truth was simpler. I wanted them to be proud of me, proud that I could help, that I was still useful. I rented a 1-bedroom apartment near the freeway. The walls were thin. I could hear the neighbor's TV at night. But I told myself it was temporary. Once the wedding was over, I'd rest. That's how self-deception works. It sounds exactly like devotion. When the pandemic hit, they needed help again. "Grandma, we can't pay the loan this month." So I withdrew another $6,000. My savings account thinned, but I kept saying yes, because saying no felt like betrayal. Because somewhere in my mind, generosity had become survival. The only way I knew to keep my family close. I remember the day I wired the final payment for the venue. The manager congratulated me like I was the one getting married. I laughed. Then I cried, though I didn't know why. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe I was scared of what would happen when there was nothing left to give. I used to bake with my granddaughter every Sunday. Cookies, pies, pancakes. The smell of butter and laughter filled that kitchen. Then one day she texted instead of calling, "Can we move Sunday? I have plans." That Sunday never came back. The call stopped once the bills were paid. The visits turned into quick drop-offs. Signatures, errands, errands, errands. "Grandma, could you sign this real quick?" "It's just a formality." One afternoon, I found out it wasn't just a formality. It was a co-signer document for a business loan I never knew existed. When I confronted my daughter, she said, "We were going to tell you, but it's just paperwork, Mom. You're protected." Protected. That word stung. I had protected everyone my entire life, yet somehow I was the one being managed, like a child. That was the first night I started writing things down. Every transaction, every date, every favor. A teacher's habit, maybe. If it's on paper, it's real. I filled 3 notebooks in 2 years. One $200 rent x 8 months. $9,600, $11,400 tuition. $2,500 car repair, $310,000 house sale. $42,000 wedding. Total, $375,500. I underlined the number twice, then once more. That was the price of my silence. Sometimes at night, I'd walk through my small apartment and imagine him, my husband, shaking his head. He used to say, "Martha, people don't respect what they don't earn." I thought he was talking about his students back then. Turns out he was warning me. The night before the wedding, I ironed my teal cardigan, the one I wore when she graduated. It still smelled faintly of lavender detergent. I remember thinking, this is what love looks like. showing up even when your heart is tired. I was wrong. Love doesn't ask you to erase yourself. Now, replaying the laughter in that ballroom, every check I ever signed feels like a confession. I wasn't helping them. I was buying a seat at a table that never had my name on it, and maybe that's what hurts the most, realizing that all those years of doing good had turned me into exactly what they saw, the old lady who's paying for everything. I wish I could say I was angry that night, but anger is clean, sharp. What I felt was something duller, heavier, like a stone in the chest, a quiet knowing that nothing I gave would ever be enough. When I got home from the wedding, I took off my cardigan and hung it on the back of a chair. The faint mark from the name tag glue was still there, a tiny dark smudge on the fabric. I touched it, then left it hanging, because for the first time I wanted to see the stain. I needed to remember it. It was proof, not of shame, but of awakening. And in that quiet apartment, with the sound of the freeway humming outside, I whispered to the empty air, "Tomorrow, Martha. Tomorrow you stop paying for everything." The hotel room was too quiet, not peaceful, just empty. I kicked off my shoes and they hit the carpet with a dull thud. The silence that followed was heavy enough to press on my chest. Somewhere below, the ballroom music still floated up through the air vents, muffled laughter, a love song, clinking glasses. The party hadn't ended yet, but for me, it already had. I sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing the teal cardigan, still smelling faintly of champagne and someone else's perfume. My hands rested in my lap like they belonged to another woman, one who hadn't just spent nearly $400,000 to be forgotten. There were rose petals scattered on the floor, part of the romance package I'd been upsold at check-in. I stared at them for a long time. They looked like blood in the dim light. I reached for my purse. Inside was the wedding invitation, thick ivory paper embossed with gold. "You are cordially invited to celebrate the union of Emily and Chase." I turned it over, searching for something that wasn't there. My name. There was only a line that read, "Sponsored by family." Family. Such a beautiful word, such an empty one tonight. On the nightstand sat a framed hotel card welcoming Mrs. Johnson. I picked it up, smiled bitterly. Even strangers showed me more courtesy than my own blood. I thought about calling my daughter. I even unlocked my phone, hovered over her name. But what would I say? "You humiliated me? You raised a child who thinks gratitude is optional?" Or maybe just, "I finally see you for who you are." I couldn't bring myself to dial. Not yet. Instead, I opened the small notebook I always carry, my record of every check, every transfer, every excuse. The numbers stared back like ghosts. $42,000 for the wedding, $310,000 from the house sale, $11,400 tuition, $9,600 rent. So much love turned into arithmetic. My husband's handwriting was on the first page, his old grocery list, faint pencil marks from years ago, coffee, milk, patience. He'd scribbled that last one as a joke. I ran my finger over the word until it smudged. Tears didn't come. They rarely do when the pain is clean. What I felt wasn't sadness. It was a kind of numb clarity, like cold metal under the skin. I walked to the window. The city shimmered below. Tiny lights. Tiny lives. Somewhere out there, people were still dancing, still believing money could buy love. I used to be one of them. I caught my reflection in the glass. The woman looking back was older, yes, but not weak. There was a steadiness in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. For the first time, I didn't look like someone's mother or grandmother. I looked like myself. I remembered a night decades ago when my husband and I almost lost everything. We'd sat at the kitchen table, bills piled high, and he said, "As long as we have each other, we're not poor." That was the kind of wealth I'd forgotten how to count. I went to the bathroom, turned on the light. The mirror was unforgiving. Mascara smudged under my eyes, lipstick faded. I looked like every tired woman who'd ever given too much and gotten too little. I leaned closer and whispered, "When did you start buying people to stay?" The woman in the mirror didn't answer, but I could see the truth in her silence. On the counter sat the name tag I'd rescued from the puddle outside. I had picked it up before driving away. Something in me couldn't leave it behind. It was still damp, the ink bleeding around the words. I pressed it flat against the mirror. The reflection doubled. 2 Marthas staring back, one broken, one beginning to breathe again. I left it there, stuck to the glass like a scar, a reminder. Then I sat on the bathroom floor, back against the cold tile, and let the night stretch around me. Outside, a car honked. Somewhere, someone laughed. The world kept turning, unaware that a woman had just decided she'd had enough. I thought about every moment I'd said yes when I wanted to say no, every time I'd written a check instead of setting a boundary, every apology I'd made for simply existing. And then I said it out loud to the empty room, no more. The words were small but solid. They hung in the air, then settled into me like a promise. I turned off the light and sat in the dark until my eyes adjusted. Slowly, the mirror reflected the faint outline of my face. No makeup, no mask, just me. That's when I realized something had shifted. Not in the world, not in them. Inside me. A quiet, defiant spark. The kind of spark that burns slow but never goes out. I stood, straightened my back, and looked at my reflection one last time. Tomorrow, I whispered, we start over. And for the first time in years, the woman in the mirror smiled back. Morning came pale and quiet. I hadn't slept much. The city was still half asleep when I stepped out of the hotel, cardigan buttoned, name tag gone. The air smelled like wet asphalt and old coffee. Honest smells, not like the perfume of last night's lies. I drove to the same bank I'd been going to for 30 years, the one where the tellers called me Miss Martha and still remembered my husband's jokes. The lobby opened at 8. I was there at 7:55, the first in line. Inside, the lights flickered on, humming softly above polished marble. I sat down across from a young man in a gray suit who introduced himself as Ethan, account manager. He couldn't have been more than 30, bright smile, too polite to ask why my hands were shaking. "How can I help you today, Mrs. Johnson?" I handed him my driver's license and said calmly, "I need to close 2 linked accounts, savings and automatic transfers, and I want to set new passwords on everything that still bears my name." He blinked. "Of course. Are you sure you want to close?" "I'm sure," I cut in, gently but firmly. He started typing. The sound of the keyboard echoed in my chest like small, fast heartbeats. "Do you have a reason for closure?" he asked. I smiled thinly. "Because generosity has an expiration date." He hesitated but didn't ask again. Within minutes, the screen glowed with a list of my standing orders, monthly transfers, automatic bill payments, the little financial arteries that had kept my family alive for years. One by one, we deleted them. One $200 monthly to my daughter, canceled. $800 for utilities at their house, canceled. $350 for car insurance under my name, canceled. With each click, something inside me loosened. My fingers stopped trembling. My shoulders lifted. When we finished, Ethan printed the confirmation slips. I signed everyone with the same slow, careful motion I used to grade essays. Ink, pressure, release. He said, "Would you like to send them notice of cancellation?" "No," I said, folding the papers. "They'll find out soon enough." Outside, the sun had climbed above the buildings, bright but cold. I stood there for a moment, breathing in. The wind tugged gently at my hair. For the first time in years, my day didn't belong to someone else. Then my phone started vibrating, "Daughter" flashing across the screen. I let it ring. Once. Twice. 3 times. On the 4th, I picked up. "Mama," she said, voice sharp with false sweetness. "Did you move some money this morning? The account's showing issues." "I did," I said. "What kind of issues?" "The kind where it's no longer your account." Silence. Then the tone changed, defensive, familiar. Mom, you're acting crazy again. We depend on that. Emily's bills. I know, I interrupted. I paid them, for years. This time, you'll find another way. Mama, please, don't do this now. We'll talk after church, okay? We can fix... No. My voice surprised even me. Calm, steady, cold. I'm done fixing. I'm done funding lessons no one's learning. She started crying. Loud, performative sobs I'd heard before. The same sound she used when she wanted a favor. Mama, how could you? I looked out at the street where a group of school children crossed the light holding hands. Because love isn't supposed to be direct deposit, I said. Then I ended the call. The quiet afterward was beautiful. I drove to the hardware store, bought a new lock for my apartment, a digital keypad instead of the old brass one my son-in-law had a copy of. The clerk, a woman about my age, rang it up without comment. She looked at me, and for some reason, I said, "I'm changing locks today." She nodded, like she understood everything without a word. At home, I took down the framed photo of my granddaughter in her cap and gown, the one I'd kept on the mantel since her graduation. I slid it into a drawer. Then I sat at my desk, pulled out my checkbook, and crossed out 2 names in the authorized users column. My pen left a clean black line. Each stroke felt like air returning to my lungs. Around noon, the phone rang again. New number. I picked up. My granddaughter's voice this time, sharp, irritated. "Grandma, Mom said you're acting strange. Are you okay?" I smiled. "Perfectly. What's going on? We have joint cards, and they're saying the transfer bounced." "That's right," she huffed. "You didn't have to make a scene after the wedding." I waited a beat, then said softly, "I didn't, but you did." "Grandma, you're overreacting." "No," I said, calm like stone. "I'm just adjusting." "Adjusting what?" "The balance." And before she could speak again, I added, "From now on, I only help people who remember my name." Then I hung up. For a long moment, I sat there listening to the silence that followed. It wasn't loneliness. It was peace. Fragile, unfamiliar, but real. I brewed myself a cup of tea, the first one I'd made just for me in years. When the steam rose, I caught my reflection in the kettle. Older, lined, but steady. Freedom has a quiet sound. It's the click of a canceled transfer, the turn of a new lock, the stillness after you say no and mean it. The silence didn't last long. By the next morning, it cracked open like glass. The first call came at 7:02 a.m. My daughter. I watched her name flash on the screen and let it ring out. Then again. Then again. 12 times before she left a voicemail. "Mom, this isn't funny. We have bills due today. Emily's credit card bounced. Call me back." Her voice trembled, but not from love, from fear of losing control. I didn't call back. By noon, the voicemails had turned into paragraphs of guilt. "Mom, are you okay? You sounded confused yesterday. You shouldn't make financial decisions alone. We're worried about you, Mom. Maybe you need someone to help manage things." Someone to help manage things. That was the new phrase. Polite, coded in concern. The same tone predators use before they bite. By evening, my granddaughter joined in. "Grandma, we just want to make sure you're safe. You've been forgetful lately." Forgetful. A word sharp as a blade. I almost laughed. The same people who forgot my name at their wedding were now questioning my memory. I brewed tea, added honey, sat by the window, and let the phone buzz itself into silence. That night, a car pulled into my driveway, headlights cutting across the living room wall. I knew that sound, her old Honda. I didn't move. Then, pounding on the door. "Mom, open up!" The knocking rattled the picture frames. I walked slowly, not rushing. When I opened the door, the night air rushed in, cold and electric. My daughter stood there, face flushed, phone still in hand. My granddaughter lingered behind her, arms crossed like a lawyer in training. "Why haven't you answered your phone?" my daughter snapped. "Because I didn't feel like it." "Mom, you're scaring us, cutting accounts, changing locks. What's going on with you?" "I told you what's going on." I said quietly. I stopped paying for everything. Her mouth fell open like I'd cursed in church. That's not fair, she hissed. We depend on you. I know, I said. That's the problem. Emily stepped forward. Grandma, maybe you should let Mom handle your finances for a while. You've been under a lot of stress. There it was. The setup, the trap. Polite words, ugly intention. I let the silence stretch, long enough for them to shift uncomfortably. Then I smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. I see. So you plan to take care of me? Of course, my daughter said too quickly. It's what family does. Family, I echoed. Family doesn't hand out name tags that say, the old lady who's paying for everything. Emily's cheeks flushed. That was just a joke. No, sweetheart, I said softly. A joke is funny to both sides. Her eyes darted to her mother, looking for help. But my daughter's face had hardened. Mom, you can't just cut us off. You'll regret this. We're your only family. The wind blew through the open doorway, carrying the faint smell of rain. Maybe, I said. Or maybe I've just mistaken proximity for love. Stop talking like that, she shouted. You're being dramatic. You're 70 years old, for God's sake. 68, I corrected. Still old enough to know when I'm being used. Her voice cracked. After everything I've done for you, I raised an eyebrow. Everything you've done? Sweetheart, all you did was sign the checks I wrote. She went silent. The air between us thickened, electric and brittle. Finally, she said quietly, You'll regret this when you're alone. I stepped back, hands still on the doorframe. I've been alone for years, I said. I just stopped pretending otherwise. I closed the door gently. Not a slam, just a full stop. Through the wood, I heard muffled voices, the sound of her car starting, then peeling away down the street. Inside, the clock ticked like a metronome. I leaned against the door, exhaled. My heart was steady, not racing. For the first time, their chaos didn't drag me under. On the kitchen table, my phone buzzed again. A new text. If you keep this up, Mom, we'll have to take legal steps. You're not thinking clearly. I stared at it, then took a photo of the screen and forwarded it to a contact labeled Mr. Davis, attorney. No message, no comment, just the evidence. Then I turned off the phone completely. The house hummed with quiet. I could hear the refrigerator running, the wind brushing the windows, the soft heartbeat of my own breath. It didn't sound like fear. It sounded like freedom stretching its limbs for the first time in decades. I poured another cup of tea and whispered, almost to myself, They're panicking. That means the spell is breaking. And when I looked at my reflection in the dark window, I saw something fierce flicker there. The beginning of power remembers its own name. I didn't plan on finding help. It found me. The day after that confrontation, I was sitting in the small public library downtown, the one where I used to volunteer before life got swallowed by family emergencies. I went there for the silence. But silence, it turns out, has a way of introducing you to people you need. The librarian on duty, a woman with salt and pepper braids and bright gold glasses, looked up from her desk. Martha Johnson, she said slowly. It's been years. Her name was Lillian. We'd taught Sunday school together back in the 90s. She studied my face for a moment, the way people do when they recognize a kind of fatigue they've felt themselves. You look like you've been carrying bricks, she said softly. I smiled. Family ones. That's all it took. Her chair rolled back and she came around the counter, lowering her voice. You need to talk to someone who knows what that means in numbers and papers, not just feelings. Numbers and papers? She nodded. Financial elder abuse, honey. Happens every day. You're not the first. The words hit me like fresh air and salt. Sharp, cleansing. Financial elder abuse. It had a name. It wasn't just disappointment or bad luck. It was a pattern, a crime, a thing that could be stopped. She wrote something on a Post-it and slid it across the table. Robert Davis, attorney, handles cases like yours. He helped my cousin last year. I hesitated. Lawyers are expensive. She smiled. So is silence. That night I called him. His voice was calm, deep, and matter-of-fact. Mrs. Johnson, you've done the right thing in contacting me. Everything you've described fits the profile. Emotional leverage, dependency, threat of guardianship. We'll document everything. For the first time, someone said, we. Not you alone. Not your overreacting. We. He asked for details. I told him about the accounts, the messages, the name tag. He didn't laugh or gasp. He just said, good, that's evidence. Then he said something that changed everything. Power isn't a feeling, Mrs. Johnson. It's paperwork. We scheduled a meeting for the next morning. His office smelled like coffee and printer ink. The walls were lined with framed certificates and a large photo of him with his mother, an older black woman, proud, dignified. When I handed him the folder I'd kept hidden for months, 3 notebooks, dozens of receipts, and the latest threatening text, he whistled softly. You've done half my job already, he said. Now let's protect what's yours. He explained how families sometimes twist guardianship laws to gain control of an elder's assets, how false reports of mental decline can be used to take away someone's right to make decisions. I listened, stunned. Everything my daughter had hinted, the concern, the forgetful comments, fit perfectly. So what do? I asked. He leaned back, hands folded. First, we create a record. Every message, every voicemail, every visit, log it. Second, we notify your bank that any power of attorney changes must go through me. Third, you choose one trusted contact outside the family. Outside? He nodded. Toxic families, close ranks. You need someone who owes them nothing. I thought for a long moment, then said, Lillian, the librarian. She's seen me when I had nothing to prove. He smiled. Perfect. Tell her she's your witness if anything happens. When I left his office, the city felt different. Louder, clearer. The weight on my chest hadn't vanished, but it had changed shape. It wasn't a burden now. It was armor. That afternoon, Lillian and I met for coffee. She brought her tablet, showing me an online group for older women who'd been financially exploited by their own families. They called themselves the Second Act Sisters. The first post I read said, they took my house, but not my story. Something inside me clicked. We talked for hours about gaslighting, guilt, and generational loyalty, about how people twist love into debt. At one point, Lillian reached across the table, squeezed my hand, and said, You've been speaking their language too long. It's time to learn your own. What language is that? I asked. Boundaries. We laughed, quietly but freely, the kind of laugh that doesn't need permission. That night, I started a new notebook. On the first page, I didn't write numbers or dates. I wrote words. Guardianship manipulation, financial dependency, elder coercion, recovery. Each term felt like a blade cutting through fog. I underlined recovery twice. When the phone rang again, I didn't flinch. I didn't even check who it was. I let it go to voicemail. I poured a glass of water, opened the window, and let the night air in. For the first time in months, I felt my lungs fill. I whispered, They can call me forgetful all they want. I remember everything now. And the room, filled with the hum of the city and the quiet scratch of my pen, didn't sound lonely anymore. It sounded like a strategy. It didn't take them long to regroup. People like that never mourn the loss of love, only access. 3 days after I meet with Mr. Davis, a thick envelope arrived by certified mail. The return address read, Bennett and Cross, Family Law Associates. Inside, formal language, stamped pages, and a petition I had to read twice to believe. Concerned family members are requesting an evaluation of Mrs. Martha Johnson's mental competency and financial capacity to ensure her well-being and prevent self-harm or exploitation. Self-harm, exploitation. The irony almost made me laugh. They were trying to declare me legally incompetent, to make themselves my guardians, my keepers, My signature. The same people who once begged me to sign their checks now wanted to sign mine. I called Mr. Davis immediately. He didn't sound surprised. "Classic move," he said. "They're escalating. They'll use social workers, bank officials, maybe even a wellness check visit. Don't panic. Everything goes through me from now on." I nodded, though my hands trembled. "What should I do?" "Stay calm," he said, "and document everything. Fear is their tool. Clarity is yours." 2 days later, the knock came. 3 sharp raps on the door. When I opened it, 2 people stood there. A woman in a beige blazer with a clipboard and a man in a county badge. "Mrs. Johnson? We're from the Department of Adult Protective Services. We received a report of possible confusion and financial mismanagement. We just need a few minutes of your time." Their tone was polite, but rehearsed. I could smell the script. I smiled. "Of course. Come in." They stepped inside. The woman glanced around, noting the tidy living room, the framed photos, the cup of tea still steaming on the table. She looked almost disappointed that the place wasn't in chaos. "Do you live alone, Mrs. Johnson?" she asked. "Yes." "Any health issues? Memory trouble?" "Only remembering who to trust," I said. The man cleared his throat. "We just like to verify you're capable of handling your finances." I gestured to the folder on the table. "You can verify with my attorney." "Your attorney?" "Yes, Mr. Robert Davis. Would you like to call him before we continue?" They exchanged a glance. I could see the tension shift. They hadn't expected me to have counsel. I dialed the number myself and handed the phone to the woman. "He's expecting you." While they spoke, I sat quietly, sipping my tea. Through the open window, I could hear birds outside, ordinary sounds in an extraordinary moment. I thought of my husband and how proud he'd be to see me calm under siege. When the call ended, the woman's tone had changed. "Thank you for your time, Mrs. Johnson. Everything seems in order." "Of course," I said. "Would you like a copy of my latest financial statement, just so you can close your file properly?" Her cheeks flushed. "That won't be necessary." They left quickly. The minute the door closed, I exhaled. My knees felt weak, but my hands were steady. I called Davis again. He chuckled softly. "That's checkmate number 1. They won't like it." He was right. That evening, my daughter showed up unannounced. No knocking this time, just the sound of her voice from the porch. "Mom, I can't believe you called a lawyer on us. We're family." "Family doesn't file guardianship petitions," I said through the screen door. She crossed her arms. "You're being manipulated, can't you see? That lawyer's just taking your money." I smiled faintly. "Then we're both in familiar company." She flinched. "We're worried about you, Mom. You've changed." "I have," I said, "and I hope it keeps them worried." She took a step closer, her tone turning sweet again. "Mom, I know you're upset about the wedding, but if you just transfer the accounts back, we can forget all this nonsense." I looked at her, the daughter I once rocked to sleep, now weaponizing my kindness. "You call it nonsense," I said softly. "I call it recovery." She exhaled hard, eyes narrowing. "You're making a fool of yourself. Everyone in the family's talking." "Good," I said. "Let them. At least they're finally saying my name." For a long moment, we just stared at each other through the mesh of the door. Her face shifted. Frustration, disbelief, a flicker of fear. Then she said the words that sealed it. "If you keep this up, we'll go to court." I nodded. "Then I'll see you there." Her lips parted, ready to argue, but I raised a hand. "From this point on, any communication goes through my attorney." "Mama, no," I said, quiet but final. "Through my attorney." The wind carried her silence back to me. She turned, stormed off, the screen door rattling from the air she left behind. I locked it, drew the bolt, and leaned my forehead against the wood. My heart was beating fast, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of reclaiming space that had been mine all along. I whispered to the empty room, "Power isn't loud, it's just documented." And for the first time in years, I felt safe. Not because someone was protecting me, but because I'd learned how to protect myself. Mr. Davis was right. Fear evaporates when you start filing paperwork. That week, I built my fortress out of folders, one for bank records, one for messages and voicemails, one labeled simply Receipts of Respect. Every night, I sat at my dining table under the warm yellow light, sorting pages into neat stacks. It felt like rebuilding myself line by line. The numbers no longer mocked me. They testified for me. When I found an old transfer slip from 3 years ago, for Emily's car Love Grandma, I almost laughed. I took a red pen and wrote across it, "No more loans in the name of love." Mr. Davis helped me draft a sworn statement. All funds transferred voluntarily under emotional pressure, not legal obligation. We attached screenshots of the texts. "Please, Mom, we'll lose the house. You don't want your granddaughter to suffer, do you? If you really loved us, you'd help." He called it coercive control. I called it blackmail in Sunday clothes. Once the files were safe, he suggested something else. "You should talk to others who've been through this," he said. "Isolation makes people easy targets. Connection restores clarity." So I went back to the community center where I used to volunteer. It was Thursday afternoon, senior craft class, the smell of coffee and glue sticks filling the room. I hadn't been there since before the wedding. When I walked in, a few heads turned. "Martha," someone gasped, "we thought you moved away." "In a way," I said, "I moved out of denial." They laughed, not quite understanding yet. But when I told them, carefully, plainly, about what had happened, the laughter softened into recognition. One woman, Betty, wiped her eyes. My son did the same thing, said I was too old to manage my pension. Another whispered, "My niece took over my bank card for convenience. I didn't even notice until Christmas." By the time I finished, 5 of us sat around the table, sharing stories that sounded like different verses of the same sad hymn. Each story had the same refrain. Love turned into leverage. Betty said, "We should do something about this." I looked at her and felt that spark again, the same one I'd seen in my own reflection that night after the wedding. "Yes," I said, "we start by not being quiet." We began meeting every Thursday. We brought cookies and highlighters, laptops and tears. We called ourselves the Lighthouse Circle. Because when the fog rolls in, someone has to keep the light steady. Mr. Davis came one afternoon explaining basic financial rights, powers of attorney, guardianship, and fraud reporting. He treated us like equals, not victims. I watched the others sit a little straighter in their chairs. I started a binder for the group, notes, resources, and emergency contacts. On the cover, I wrote, "Freedom has fine print too. Learn to read it." We began helping new members draft letters to their banks, report unauthorized transactions, and request mental competency evaluations from independent doctors, not from family connections. Every form filled was a piece of stolen dignity reclaimed. Lillian helped design flyers. Protect your name. Protect your story. Join the Lighthouse Circle. We left them at the library, the church, and the post office bulletin board. Within a month, more women showed up. A retired nurse, a widow from the next county, even a quiet man who'd been tricked into signing over his RV. I watched them talk, cry, laugh, plan, and I realized something simple but enormous. I was never crazy. I was groomed to believe dependency was love. One evening, as the sun sank through the blinds, Betty looked at me and said, "You've got a teacher's voice, Martha. You should be leading this." I smiled. "I'm just taking attendance for those who finally showed up for themselves." We all laughed, the deep, healing kind. That night, back home, I organized my files one last time. The table was clean, the folders labeled, and everything cross-referenced. I slipped a note on top of the pile for Mr. Davis. "If they come again, I'm ready." Then I opened my new notebook, the one where I wrote words instead of numbers. On the next blank page, I wrote, "Tan yo that kong can fai tra gop moa thang." True love doesn't come with monthly payments. I underlined it twice. The sound of pen on paper was soft but final, like a door closing gently. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea, opened the window, and listened to the night. Somewhere, a train horn echoed, distant, steady, free. And I thought, that's me now. Not running, not hiding, just moving forward carrying only what's mine. The courthouse smelled of old paper and rain. Every footstep echoed like punctuation marks on a long, unfinished sentence. I wore the same teal cardigan from the wedding, washed, pressed, unashamed. Mr. Davis walked beside me, carrying a black briefcase heavy with proof, bank statements, printed messages, affidavits, and a psychiatric evaluation from Dr. Thomas, a man who'd spoken with me for 3 hours and declared, Mrs. Johnson possesses full cognitive capacity and emotional stability. We entered courtroom 4B. Rows of wooden benches, the American flag draped behind the judge's chair, the air stiff with anticipation. At the front table sat my daughter and granddaughter with their attorney, a man in a shiny navy suit and a smile that didn't touch his eyes. They looked confident, rehearsed. I'd once been proud of how poised my granddaughter was. Now I saw that poise as something colder, inherited not from love, but from calculation. When they saw me, Emily looked away. My daughter gave a practiced sigh and whispered to her lawyer. I took my seat. My pulse was steady. The bailiff called the room to order. "All rise for Judge Evans." She entered. A black woman in her 50s, sharp gaze, calm voice. I liked her immediately. She looked like someone who'd seen every kind of story and could tell truth from performance in a heartbeat. Their lawyer began, "Your Honor, we're here out of genuine concern. Mrs. Johnson has displayed erratic financial behavior, liquidating assets, cutting off family support, and engaging counsel under suspicious circumstances. We believe she's being manipulated and is no longer capable of managing her own affairs." He gestured toward me with the kind of sympathy that feels like a slap. Her family simply wants to protect her. The judge turned to me. "Mrs. Johnson, do you have representation?" Mr. Davis stood. "Yes, Your Honor, Robert Davis, counsel for Mrs. Johnson." He opened his folder with quiet precision. "Your Honor, the petitioners claim my client is confused. Let's examine that." He clicked a remote. The courtroom monitor lit up with screenshots, messages from my daughter and granddaughter. "Mom, please transfer $3,000 today, or Emily's car will be repossessed." "Grandma, the bank needs your signature again. Hurry." "You're not thinking straight. We'll handle it for you." The judge's brow furrowed. "These are from your family." "Yes, Your Honor," Davis said, and attached are the corresponding transfers totaling $375,500 over 5 years. He handed copies to the court clerk. My client kept meticulous records, dates, times, memos. Does that sound like confusion to you? The opposing lawyer shifted in his seat. "These are acts of generosity, not exploitation." "Generosity doesn't require manipulation," Davis replied evenly, "or threats of legal action when the money stops." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Then they called my daughter to the stand. She walked up gracefully, wearing a pearl necklace I'd bought her for her 40th birthday. "Mrs. Bennett," the judge said, "you're claiming your mother is mentally unfit?" "Yes," she said softly. "We've noticed changes. She's paranoid, forgetful, easily influenced. This lawyer," she glanced at Davis, "has turned her against us." Davis stood. "Permission to cross, Your Honor?" The judge nodded. He approached the stand slowly. "Mrs. Bennett, how many times did you request money from your mother in the past 5 years?" I don't know exactly." "Would more than 50 sound fair?" She hesitated. "Maybe." "Would more than 100 surprise you?" Silence. He held up a page from my notebook. "Her records show 138 requests. Not gifts, requests. And everyone labeled urgent." The judge leaned forward. "Mrs. Bennett, do you dispute these records?" My daughter swallowed hard. I was under stress. Understandable, the judge said, but stress doesn't justify coercion. Davis continued, voice quiet but cutting. Did you or your daughter ever invite Mrs. Johnson to live with you? She blinked. No, we don't have the space. Yet you had space for her money? The courtroom went still. Even I had to hide a small smile. Then finally, it was my turn. Mr. Davis whispered, "Take your time. You don't owe them anger, just truth." I stood and approached the witness stand. The wood felt cool beneath my palms as I took the oath. "Mrs. Johnson," the judge began, "you've heard the petition. Do you wish to respond?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said. My voice didn't shake. I raised my daughter alone after my husband died. I paid for her home, her child's education, and their wedding. I did it out of love, not obligation. But when love became currency, I realized I wasn't part of a family anymore. I was part of a budget. A quiet gasp from somewhere behind me. I may be old, Your Honor, but I am not confused. I'm careful. I'm tired of being told that wisdom is senility just because it's inconvenient. If being clear-headed makes me difficult, then I'll gladly be difficult. The judge watched me closely, pen resting in her hand. "Continue," she said softly. "I didn't come here to win back their affection," I said. "I came here to win back my name. Because it's mine, not the old lady who's paying for everything. Just Martha Johnson." When I finished, the room was silent. Even my daughter avoided my eyes. Judge Evans adjusted her glasses. The court finds no evidence of diminished capacity. In fact, Mrs. Johnson's documentation demonstrates exceptional clarity. The guardianship petition is hereby dismissed. Her gavel hit once, sharp and final. "Mrs. Johnson, you are free to manage your own affairs as you see fit." The sound echoed through me like a heartbeat restarting. Davis turned to me, smiling. "That's justice, Martha." "No," I whispered. "That's balance." As I left the courtroom, I passed my daughter in the aisle. She reached out, maybe to speak, maybe to grab my hand. But I didn't stop. Some silences are sacred. Outside, the sky had cleared after days of rain. I stood on the courthouse steps, breathing air that didn't taste of shame anymore. Across the street, the courthouse flag fluttered in the breeze, not a symbol of victory, but of truth, surviving noise. Mr. Davis said, "How do you feel?" "Like someone just handed me back my last name," I said. Then I looked up at the bright sky and added, "And this time, I'm the one signing the checks." I didn't call them after the trial, didn't send a message, didn't need to. Silence does what revenge can't. It leaves space for echo. 3 weeks later, the echo found me. Lillian came by the library with that careful expression people wear when they're about to deliver bad news you might secretly enjoy. "You haven't heard?" she asked. I raised an eyebrow. "Emily and her husband, they're in trouble. His company is being investigated for misappropriating client funds. He used part of their wedding money as startup capital." I said nothing for a moment. The hum of the photocopier filled the air between us. "How bad?" "Bad enough that their house is up for sale?" I nodded slowly. "So the golden couple's castle was built on borrowed sand." Lillian's eyes softened. "You don't have to feel guilty. You didn't push them there." "I know," I said quietly. They were already walking toward the edge. I just stopped cushioning the fall. A month later, Mr. Davis forwarded me a notice. Apparently, my daughter had tried to use my name again, this time on a refinancing application for her own mortgage. The bank flagged it instantly. Fraud alert. He handled it, of course. Sent a neat little letter that read, "Any future attempt to use Mrs. Johnson's personal or financial information will be treated as identity theft under state law." No emotion, just facts. The kind of language predators understand best. That was the last time my daughter's lawyer contacted us. I didn't celebrate. Instead, I spent my days quietly. tending my small balcony garden, reading, attending Lighthouse Circle meetings. Life became smaller but richer. Every act felt intentional, even making coffee. One morning, while watering the lavender, I saw an envelope slid under my door. No stamp, no name, just Mom. Inside was a single sheet of paper. My daughter's handwriting, shaky, uneven. "You win. Are you happy now? Emily doesn't speak to me. Chase left. I'm losing everything. You destroyed our family." I read it once, then again. There was no apology, just blame. But buried between the lines, I could smell the first whiff of accountability, the kind that starts as bitterness before it turns into truth. I folded the letter neatly and tucked it into my file labeled Evidence of Change, because even guilt, when it arrives, is a kind of proof. News travels fast in small towns. People whispered that Emily had moved into a small apartment downtown, that she was working part-time at a bridal shop. Irony not lost on anyone. Someone said she avoided weddings altogether now, couldn't stand the music. When I heard that, I felt a strange mix of sadness and serenity. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to learn what enough really means. I never wished them harm, only clarity. And clarity, as I'd learned, has a cruel tutor, consequence. One Sunday afternoon, I walked into the same church where I'd once sat proudly beside them. The pews smelled of old wood and lemon polish. The choir sang softly a hymn about mercy. After the service, Pastor Reed approached me. "Martha, it's good to see you again. You look lighter." "I am," I said. He smiled. "I heard about the case. You showed grace under fire." "Grace," I repeated. "I call it boundaries with good posture." He laughed, the kind of laugh that reaches the heart. That evening, as I sat on my porch watching the sun melt into the horizon, I saw two young women from the Lighthouse Circle walking by. They waved. One of them called out, "We used your phrase in the meeting today. Well, love doesn't come with monthly payments." I waved back. "Good. Make sure they remember it." They laughed and disappeared down the street, their voices fading into twilight. I closed my eyes and breathed in the scent of my lavender. The air was warm, gentle. Somewhere in the distance, a car door slammed. Maybe Emily's, maybe not. It didn't matter. I no longer needed to know where she was to wish her well. I whispered, half prayer, half promise, may they find what they were looking for, but may they earn it this time. Then I leaned back in my chair, listening to the cicadas hum. For the first time in years, the sound didn't feel like noise. It felt like peace having a conversation with itself. Freedom doesn't arrive with trumpets. It comes quietly, like sunrise through half-closed blinds. 6 months after the trial, I sold the apartment, packed only what fit into my car, clothes, books, my husband's photo, and one small box labeled Proof I Survived. Inside were the court papers, the old name tag, and a lavender sprig I'd pressed between the pages of my notebook the night everything changed. I drove south until the city disappeared in the rearview mirror, and the air began to smell like salt and pine. I ended up in a coastal town where no one knew my story, and that anonymity felt like oxygen. The house I bought wasn't large, but it had a porch that faced the ocean. White paint peeling, shingles faded by the wind. To anyone else, it looked tired. To me, it looked honest. The first night, I left the windows open. The sea air rolled in, heavy with mist, washing away the last traces of courthouse dust and city noise. I fell asleep to the sound of waves hitting the rocks like a heartbeat, steady, forgiving. By spring, I'd found a rhythm. Mornings started with coffee and the newspaper on the porch, then a walk to the farmer's market where vendors began calling me Miss Martha from the shore. I joined a painting class at the community center, even though I'd never painted before. The first thing I put on canvas wasn't a person or a landscape. It was the teal cardigan, draped over a chair under soft light. My teacher said, "That looks like freedom." I smiled. "It feels like it too." I started volunteering again, this time with a small nonprofit that taught older women how to manage online banking and avoid scams. Every week, I'd stand at the front of the room, a circle of gray hair, glasses, and quiet courage, and say, "Rule number 1, never confuse love with obligation." They'd nod, some with tears, some with laughter that sounded suspiciously like relief. Lillian came to visit one weekend. She looked around the small house, the ocean glittering behind it. "You really did it," she said. "I had to," I answered. "If I stayed where they broke me, I'd keep breaking myself." We spent the afternoon cooking gumbo, talking about the Lighthouse Circle, which was now hosting seminars at libraries across 3 counties. She told me they'd started quoting my line, "Love doesn't come with monthly payments." I laughed. "Maybe I should trademark it." "Maybe you already did," she said, "in blood, sweat, and attorney fees." One morning, while walking along the beach, I saw a group of kids flying kites. Their laughter floated above the surf. A little girl with curls like mine ran up, holding out a shell. "For you," she said. I took it. The inside shimmered with silver, the same color as that old name tag. "Thank you," I said. "It's beautiful." She grinned. "My grandma says shells remember the ocean, even when they're far away." I watched her run back to the others, the kite string bright against the sky. When I got home, I placed the shell on the windowsill. It caught the morning light and threw it gently across the room. That's when I decided to let the past finally drift out with the tide. That evening, I walked to the water's edge. The sky was the color of copper and honey. I carried the old name tag with me, the one that once defined my humiliation. It was faded now, the letters barely visible. I ran my thumb over the words, "The old lady who's paying for everything." "Not anymore," I whispered. I placed it on the surface of the water. For a moment, it floated, spinning slowly before the tide pulled it under and carried it away. I stood there barefoot, feeling the cold salt wrap around my ankles. Every wave that touched me felt like an apology I didn't know I'd been waiting for. Behind me, the porch light flicked on automatically, spilling a soft glow over the sand. It looked almost like a lighthouse beam, small but unwavering. And in that moment, I realized I hadn't lost a family. I'd gained myself. Now, when people ask if I'm lonely, I tell them the truth. "No," I say. "Loneliness is when you're surrounded by people who love what you give, not who you are." Out here, solitude is a friend. It doesn't take, it teaches. I've learned to cook for one and enjoy every bite. I've learned that quiet doesn't mean empty, and I've learned that starting over at 68 isn't late. It's right on time. Sometimes, at sunset, I pour a glass of wine and raise it to the sea. To the old lady who stopped paying for everything, I toast, and the waves answer softly like laughter returning home. It's been almost a year since the courthouse closed that chapter of my life. The lavender on my porch has grown tall, stubborn against the wind, just like me. Some nights, when the tide comes in high, I sit by the window and watch the sea swallow the horizon. It reminds me that nothing truly ends. It only changes form. People still ask if I ever made peace with my daughter. I tell them peace doesn't always mean reunion. Sometimes it means release. Forgiveness to me isn't a door you open for someone else. It's a key you turn to walk yourself out of a cage. I've stopped replaying the wedding in my head. I no longer hear the laughter or see the name tag. What I remember now is the exact moment after. That quiet, defiant heartbeat when I realized I was done buying love. That was the moment I came back to life. Last week, I was invited to speak at a local women's forum about financial independence in later life. Standing there, looking at rows of faces, some gray, some young but already tired, I said, "Don't let them call you crazy for protecting what you earned. Don't let guilt speak louder than your good sense, and never confuse giving with surrender." After the session, a woman about my age came up, eyes glassy with tears. "My daughter's doing the same thing to me," she whispered. I touched her hand. "Then start your record. Write everything down. The truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to be documented." She laughed through the tears. "You sound like a teacher." "I used to be one," I said. "Now I just teach survival." At night, when the moon lays a silver path across the water, I write in my journal. Not numbers this time, but thoughts I want to leave behind. Things I wish someone had told me before I mistook sacrifice for love. You don't owe anyone your peace to prove your care. Family can be blood or betrayal. Choose the kind that doesn't drain you. Tinyo that kongko bangjia. Freedom isn't loud. It's the sound of your own breath when you stop apologizing for it. Sometimes I imagine younger women, or even my own granddaughter years from now, finding these pages. Maybe she'll understand someday that I didn't stop loving them. I just stopped funding their mistakes. Maybe then she'll whisper to herself, "Grandma wasn't cold. She was free." I'm 68, and for the first time I understand something simple and enormous. People will tell you that age makes you weaker. It doesn't. It just removes the noise so you can finally hear your own voice. I look back at the woman who stood frozen in that ballroom holding a tag that mocked her, and I want to tell her, "You did the right thing walking out. You didn't lose your family that night. You lost your fear." The sea roars outside, steady, endless. I raise my cup of tea toward the window, a small toast to the version of me that refused to stay broken. And to you, the one listening to my story. I'll ask only this. Have you ever bought love with your silence? Have you ever paid the bill for someone else's comfort while calling it kindness? If the answer is yes, then maybe it's time to do what I did. Cancel the transfer, change the locks, and remember your name, because freedom isn't given. It's reclaimed. One decision, one document, one boundary at a time. And when you finally stand there, steady and alone, hearing the world go quiet around you, you'll know what I mean when I say, "Tu du hong bao gio la mon kwa kwa jat." Freedom is never too expensive when the price is your dignity.